It's so nice to be back in our worship home. I never doubted we'd be back here, neither did any of the rest of you, as far as I can tell. Though we didn't know how long it would take, we expected the good news of return. I wish that was true for the rest of the state of things. We've come to expect disaster. We've come to expect bad things to happen. We expect people to get worse with each other, not better. This pessimism is not a new thing. At the time when Isaiah 40 announces its good news, bad news for Israel was all around. The exile was in full force, temple destroyed, leadership whisked away by the Babylonians. The first 39 chapters of Isaiah are all about naming the reality of the bad news and how Israel brought it on itself. But chapter 40 introduces good tidings. It introduces good tidings out of nowhere. It is introduced for no other reason than God's decision that Israel's penalty is paid. That penalty in the prophetic tradition is the judgment by God on all the injustice that brought the exile on in the first place, taking advantage of the poor, refusing to take care of widows, the least of these in that time, practicing idolatry, neglecting the neighborly ethic at the root of the commandments. There are times when that prophetic word needs to be preached because it is at the root of most of the injustice in most communities. It's important that it be preached because human beings have the habit of blaming each other for what's wrong instead of looking internally, whether personally or systemically, to change what needs to be changed, to rebalance our relations with each other and with God. The gospel does afflict the comfortable on many, many occasions. Yet sometimes I wonder if our prophetic version of the gospel is the one that we are so accustomed to preaching, the judgment on everything that we see as bad, wrong, disordered about the world or other people we know. The bad news is all we come to expect. It feeds our downcast countenance, turns us into cynical and judgmental Debbie Downers in all times and places, in a way that feeds on itself. Expecting bad news does have some upsides. It protects you from the disappointment that comes when reality undercuts your expectations. Expect the worst, the saying goes, but hope for the best. Though I'm not sure that you can really hope for the best while expecting the worst. But protection from disappointment is not the only reason that expecting bad news has its privileges. It also has the appearance of insulating you from whatever ill-fated decision that you do not like. It's why some people don't vote, why others stay out of groups or faith communities, clubs, or affiliations. If I don't participate, then you can't blame me for whatever bad decision is made by the group or the community or the electorate. Still another reason some people prefer to expect bad news is they believe that fear is the greater motivator than the expectation of something good actually happening in the world. This makes sense, as you would think that warning people about, say, the penalties for climate change would be the strongest motivator of all. Most of us have tried protecting ourselves in some or all of these ways. But the sudden appearance of the 40th chapter of Isaiah suggests that Israel's surprising expectation of homecoming of comfort that God can bring on the other side of misfortune, peace on the other side of so much war, love on the other side of so much hate, is a different alternative that deserves attention at a similar time when, as far as I can tell, there's a very slim rational basis for hope in our political system, hope for peace in the Middle East, now that the Israeli government seems hell-bent on pursuing war, and transformation in the climate that we have been unable to change. I want to suggest that anticipating homecoming, when the rest of the prognosticators are predicting more exile, might still be the better posture to take. Now, if that sounds close to a preacher proposing that we go and live in the land of denial together, I would say you're right. It sounds that way to me as well. I'm as surprised as anyone at these ruminations. Most of the bad news that is part of our world right now could be changed if people would actually follow the basic commandments introduced by Torah, clarified by Jesus, spread into the world by the early church. Love God and love your neighbor. It's all that easy and it's all that hard, as one of my colleagues says in their benediction every week. That God equation needs to be preached all over the world, wherever governments slide into war, wherever climate change deniers spread their lies, and here close to home, whenever politicians down in Annapolis or TV stations from their television hills try to blame our city's troubles on something that does not include the planned history of disinvestment that is at the root of our histories of racial segregation and injustice. But what if choosing to believe that the world is changing for the better, is going to change for the better, was not a substitute for noticing all of the injustice in the world? What if expecting homecoming in the midst of exile was not an attempt to deny any facts on the ground? What if deciding to believe peace was inevitable while the facts on the ground pointed in the opposite direction was not an attempt to turn away from the pain and sorrow before us, but the very thing that enables us to see it and hold it and confront it, the very thing that could lead us to the change that we seek? I wonder if Isaiah recognized that announcing good news is not denying what needs to change. It is rather announcing the change on the other side of the prophetic critique. And while I know that that is very obvious on the face of it, still history is littered with so-called prophets who could not make the change from opposition leaders to true change agents. People whose oppositional muscles were flexed so often that they seem to have forgotten what it was that they were fighting for in the first place: a just community, a fair world, a neighborhood marked by God's shalom. I remember a number of years ago when a certain city council person was unable to make that shift from oppositional leader to change agent. It surprised me, as I thought the council person was really wanting the kind of change that we were on the cusp of creating together. And the late Bishop Miles, who mentored me in so much of this public work, said to me, "You know, Andrew, he's been losing for so long, he doesn't know how to win." It turns out that change wasn't actually the root of this person's mission, just opposition. Isaiah's mission is change because that is God's mission. We've heard that message in various forms all this year. It's at the root of the Jonah story that we studied together over lunch after church. The prophet who recognizes the uncomfortable truth about God's mercy. That God isn't after punishing our enemies, but recruiting them. God's aim isn't destroying the opposition, but converting them to God's ways. God isn't about destruction for destruction's sake. God is about transformation, and sometimes the first transformation that is necessary is your own inner skeptic who can cloud your vision of how God is already at work all the time. I'm thrilled that so many of you are coming to the Build Action tomorrow night. It's an hour-and-a-half action of what many of us have been working on for several years of our lives. A vision for the total transformation of the city of Baltimore, scaling up the work that we've done in several neighborhoods in East Baltimore, where abandoned homes have nearly been eliminated. The population has increased by 50%. And legacy residents not only have not been displaced, but they've had their wealth restored to them. All by fixing markets whose demise was brought about by the redlining policies of the federal government generations ago. The unveiling of the plan with the mayor and the Greater Baltimore Committee tomorrow night is much more than a handshake. This is a written agreement based on the work we've been doing weekly for the last several months with financing analysis from some of the foremost housing experts in the country who we hired together to vet the work. The last time that Build, the Greater Baltimore business community, and the mayor of Baltimore came together, they created the College Bound Foundation that has sent tens of thousands of Baltimore City youth to college. A program that has outlived any single administration, civic or business leader. For me personally, this community transformation plan feels like the culmination of my near 20-year call here at Brown Memorial. Living into the vision that this community held long before me for the church rooted in the city to be in partnership with other faith leaders, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and no faith at all, in a Black-led organization whose membership reflects the racial diversity of our city, to build enough power ourselves so that the truth could be heard when we spoke it. The vision glorious of a city where all God's children have a home. It's the work you not only authorized me to do, but expect me to do. And the only reason I bear part of the mantle bestowed upon me by Bishop Miles, Reverend Marion Bascom, and others. And yet I have this nagging feeling that good news may be hard for many of us to live into. We've been losing for so long. We don't have a lot of experience winning. We've been cynical for so long, it's become its own kind of comfort. And this is a problem, since a pathway to rebuilding the city without displacing anyone with the values of neighborhoods planning and leading their own redevelopment firmly at the foundations is just a pathway. It doesn't happen without a community committed to making it happen. It doesn't happen without a people driven by the anticipation of homecoming and the expectation that legislators and the governor will do what needs to be done for neighborhoods, not just for athletic teams, not just for the Inner Harbor. But that's where Isaiah's voice is so crucial, announcing that wherever this kind of good news is received, wherever it appears, God is absolutely present. Good news to the poor, economic, material, mental health restored, wherever this is taking place, God is absolutely present. And wherever God is absolutely present, we can be assured that homecoming is inevitable. Shalom is inevitable. The healing of the planet, its creatures, its people is inevitable from war and grief and heartache and injustice. It is inevitable. And that inevitability shouldn't cause any of us to rest on our laurels. It should propel us further into the fray, armed with love, forgiveness, and hope to spread and receive the peace that is available to us right now. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I want to close with a poem. I apologize to its author, our own Gail Hambleton, because I didn't get her permission to share it. I only got it yesterday. I have to take Ed's word that it's okay for this, but it arrived in my inbox when I was struggling for an ending. Sudden, surprising good news which I did not expect. Words that rose up inside of Gail from where? I do not know. Now is the time to be hopeful. If you are hopeful when the situation in the world is hopeful, what credit is that to you? For even atheists have hope when the world is hopeful. Be hopeful even when the world is despairing. Now is the time to be courageous. If you are courageous when the situation in the world is relatively peaceful, what credit is that to you? For even atheists are courageous when the world is well. Be courageous even when the world falls into chaos. Now is the time to be faithful. If you are faithful when the world is progressing well, what credit is that to you? For even atheists are confident when the world is well. Be faithful even in an environment of doubt. Now is the time to be positive and work for peace. If you are building peace when the situation in the world is cooperative, what credit is that to you? Even atheists are positive and work when the world is well. Be positive and work for peace even in the midst of war. This is a calling for the family of God. Those who know, not just believe, that thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.